This is Unit 4, Access Control Part 1, Identity Management for UCLA Extension 420.1. We're going to talk about how to manage users' identities in large organizations and the different tricks and techniques for doing this effectively. Overview of this class. Access controls. Control how users interact with systems. Between the subject and the object, access is the information passing between them. Most definitions, apart from the text, definitely distinguish identification and authentication, the process of asserting an identity and proving that identity, from so-called access controls, which are, given that you've already proven your identity, what are you allowed to do? For some reason, perhaps because the CISSP does this also, both of these concepts are merged into the notion of access controls in this text. Identity management. It's automating the process of identification, authentication, and authorization. Managing digital identities and their ties to the real-world entities throughout their life cycle. The life cycle starts with onboarding, with hiring or provisioning a resource, following the individual as they may assume different roles in the organization to the point where they leave the organization and their access is dismantled or disabled. It makes this organization and management of identity more efficient and scalable, able to handle large numbers of users and different machines. Identity management can involve many different techniques, including directories, which is the central source of information on users, and perhaps other resources as well. Web access management, which leverages the protocols and services of the World Wide Web to manage identity. Legacy single sign-on, how to tie together old systems that were never meant to support identity management, generally by proxying their identification, by putting something in between the user and the system. Account management, the discipline of managing user accounts and user privileges. And profile update, managing all the other useful information about users in addition to their ID and passwords. Directories, the store of user identification information. A directory in general is a store of stable reference information. There's a standard called X500 which defines a standard database format for directories. The X500 series was developed by an international committee and first approved in 1988, so it's been around quite a while. Directory services were initially developed to support the requirements of an X.400 electronic mail exchange and name lookup. X500 defines a hierarchical organization of entities that can be supported by multiple servers. It had a directory access protocol called, of course, DAP. What we use now is the Lightweight Directory Access Protocol, or LDAP. It's an application protocol for accessing and maintaining distributed directory information services over an Internet Protocol network. Windows Active Directory is an example of a directory service. It's Microsoft version of these services combining LDAP, Kerberos for authentication, and Domain Name Service or DNS for name resolution. Directories use a hierarchical namespace to uniquely find and identify entities, and directories require that client software be designed to access directory services. Your clients, your applications, and so forth need to be LDAP aware to take advantage of the power of the directory. Directories used in identity management. Entities requiring authentication are organized into directories. Identification information thereby is stored in these directories as well. Information to support authentication may also be stored in a directory. Of course, properly encrypted and secured. You can store encrypted or hashed passwords, for example, cryptographic certificates, and the binding to the LDAP service itself. LDAP may also contain authorities for users. It's not just strictly the identity and the authentication, but it may also be what that user is allowed to do, may be also defined in the directory. Now, web access management. If you've ever gone to a website, a blog or something, and it says log in here using your Facebook credentials, that's an example of this. It's used to control access where resources are served as web pages to a web browser. The web server performs authentication using the standard web authentication mechanisms in the protocols, the basic authentication or form-based authentication or whatever. Access controls involve the web server using this identity to control access to specific URL or other resources, so everything here is very web-centric. You authenticate to the web server, and then the web server keeps a record of who you are. And when you ask for something, for a new web page or to perform a function, it is the web server, or perhaps its back-end business logic, that decides whether you're allowed to do that or not. Now, password management. The purpose of password management is to enhance the security of passwords while reducing administrative overhead and user inconvenience, trying to make passwords stronger and yet reduce the pain factor of using and managing passwords. Some of the methods include password synchronization, methods of ensuring that passwords across disparate systems are changed in sync when other forces like the user, for example, changes them. You change multiple passwords in multiple systems at a single time. Self-service password reset, where users are allowed to set their own passwords, usually by answering some secret question only the user can supposedly answer. Beware of secret questions where the answer can be easily guessed, by the way. And an assisted password reset, which is designed not for end users but for help desk staff to verify user identity before resetting passwords. Things to help these folks in figuring out that this person really is who they claim to be. Kind of an authentication to get a new password. Now, legacy single sign-on. We all have, if our organization's been around for more than a decade or two, we have some older systems that don't work well with modern sorts of single sign-on. Older mainframe and mini computer systems, certain types of applications, etc., may not interface with directory services or with other standard enterprise single sign-on systems. Custom solutions are often required for these systems, or some very clever, very specialized vendor software. Some portion of your systems may always require custom scripting to work with single sign-on. The demise of the mainframe was predicted 30 years ago, yet they still live on. There will always be a role for legacy single sign-on as long as we have technology that has existed prior to the advent of password and identity management. Account management. Account management involves the creation, maintenance, and decommission of user accounts. It's a flip side of single sign-on. It's a single point to administer multiple accounts, where a single sign-on is a single account to authenticate to multiple systems. The functions of account management include provisioning, setting up the account based on an authoritative source such as the human resource database. It includes the establishment of user accounts and attributes across all or maybe most corporate systems. Profile updates. A profile is a relevant descriptive information about a user besides their ID and authentication information. Name, address, phone number, employee ID number, department working for, etc. Profile update includes the functions and associated rights for updating this data. Some of it the user themselves can update, others only specific corporate functions can update. Federation. Federated identity is an identity established and validated at one organization that can be used at others. If you have a Facebook account, you may have noticed that many other services allow you to log in using your Facebook ID. This is a form of federated identity. Facebook is in fact managing and vouching for your identity to these other websites. As companies outsource services, federated identity becomes very important in allowing employees and outsourced contractors direct access to company services. The end.